She found Mr. Darcy and Mr. Fitzwilliam in the dining parlour. They were speaking of some aspect of estate management when she entered the room, but both men broke off their discussion and stood up upon her arrival. "Miss Elizabeth," Fitzwilliam said courteously, "how is your sister today?" "She had a disturbed night, I fear, but I believe that her fever is less severe," Elizabeth replied. She made her way to the buffet table and chose bread and sliced ham to break her fast, and then poured herself a cup of coffee. "I am sorry that she is so unwell," Darcy said, pulling out a chair for Elizabeth. She nodded gratefully and sat down and began eating hungrily as the gentlemen took their own places. "Thank you," she said, after eating a few bites of eggs. "Poor Kitty. She's the most delicate of us all, though she's not precisely sickly. I do hope that she will be well by tomorrow so we can return home and leave you in peace." "I assure you that you are in no way a bother," Darcy said, so genuinely that Fitzwilliam glanced at him oddly. Elizabeth smiled and took a sip of coffee. "Thank you, that is very kind of you to say, but unexpected visitors can wreak havoc on a household, especially when one of the visitors is ill. At least it was Kitty who sickened, not Lydia. That would have been a nightmare for everyone." That evening, Netherfield. Elizabeth kissed her sister on the cheek, relieved to find Kitty's skin to be only slightly overwarm, and made her way to the mirror. There were dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep, and her dress was wrinkled, but she refused to worry about it. Miss Darcy would not care, and Miss Bingley would look down on her regardless of what she was wearing or how her face looked. She picked up her sketchbook and pencil and descended to the main level to the sound of the clock chiming the 9th hour. She had not gone down to dinner today, as Kitty had been awake, coughing and unhappy, but now that her sister was asleep, Elizabeth felt obligated to join the party in the drawing-room. At least the Darcys, Mrs. Annesley, and Mr. Bingley were welcoming enough. "Miss Elizabeth!" Georgiana exclaimed as she entered. "How is Miss Kitty?" "I think she is improving," Elizabeth said, "though she is still ill. She's peacefully asleep now." "I will continue to pray for her," the girl said shyly. "Thank you. I did have the opportunity to work some more on the sketch I started this morning from our time in the music room. Would you care to see it?" "Oh, very much," Miss Darcy exclaimed, and took Elizabeth's sketchbook with interest, which shifted to delight. "Oh, Fitzwilliam, look!" Darcy, who had been writing a business letter, set his pen aside as his sister hurried to his side to display the drawing. He had been prepared to be impressed, but he was more than impressed. He was awed. Miss Elizabeth had drawn Georgiana in profile, seated at the pianoforte, with her long, elegant fingers pressing down on the ivory keys of black and white. It was remarkably lifelike, and captured Georgiana's posture and demeanour perfectly. "It is very well done, Miss Elizabeth," he said, turning a grateful gaze on the lady. "Your sister is a delightful subject for a sketch," Elizabeth replied. "She was prepared to play the instrument for hours on end while I drew and erased." "It really is quite charming, Miss Eliza," Miss Bingley said. "Am I right that you learned some of your sketching skills from your uncle, who is an artist, the one in Cheapside?" Elizabeth smiled at her hostess and said, "I have two uncles in Cheapside, actually. Yes, one of them is an artist, and he acted as my drawing master in my youth." Miss Bingley smiled back at her, pleased to have brought up the reality of the Bennets' lowbrow relations. Darcy returned to his business letter, but he found his gaze shifting frequently to his sister and Miss Elizabeth, who were now seated side by side near the fire, talking with animation about something or the other. He had never seen Georgiana so at ease with a new acquaintance in such a short amount of time. The Bennet ladies were extraordinary.